The leather chair creaked as Ethan Cole leaned back, his piercing blue eyes scanning the document before him. Beyond the towering glass windows, the Chicago skyline stretched into the distance, the city's golden glow reflecting off the steel and glass structures. It was a breathtaking view, a testament to everything he had built with Cole Tech. And now all of it could be ripped away because of one ridiculous clause in a will. Ethan tossed the document onto his desk with a sharp flick, his jaw tightening as if restraining an impending storm. His piercing blue eyes locked onto his lawyer, Mark Whitman, who remained impassive under his scrutiny. "You've got to be joking." His voice was a lethal mix of disbelief and simmering anger. Mark remained composed, his hands clasped behind his back as if he had anticipated this reaction. "I'm afraid it's all legally binding, Ethan. According to your father's will, in order to retain control of Coltech, you must be married before your 35th birthday. And," he glanced at his watch, "you have exactly 3 months." Ethan clenched his jaw. At 34, he had transformed Coltech from a struggling startup into a powerhouse in artificial intelligence. Their innovations were shaping industries, revolutionizing everything from finance to healthcare. Yet now, everything he had worked for hinged on something he had never prioritized: marriage. "This is absurd." He ran a hand through his neatly styled black hair, frustration evident in the tight lines of his face. "I run a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, not a dating show." Mark tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Your father believed in traditional values. He wanted his successor to have a balanced life." Ethan let out a sharp laugh, devoid of humor. "Balanced? The man worked me to the bone since I was 16, every summer, every holiday, every weekend. When exactly was I supposed to find time for dating?" A sharp buzz from his desk intercom interrupted the conversation. His assistant's voice filled the room. "Mr. Cole, the board is waiting for you in the conference room." Ethan pressed the button. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." Turning back to Mark, his expression hardened. There has to be a way around this. Mark sighed, removing his glasses and meeting Ethan's gaze head-on. "I've examined every legal angle. The will is airtight. If you're not married by your 35th birthday, control of Coltech transfers to the board." Ethan pushed to his feet, walking to the window, staring down at the bustling streets below. Thousands of people, going about their lives, blissfully unaware that one of the most powerful CEOs in the country had just been backed into a corner in his own office. 3 months to find someone willing to marry a workaholic CEO with trust issues. Impossible. But then Mark spoke again, his tone measured, calculated. "Actually, I might have a solution." Ethan turned, eyes narrowing. "Do you remember Olivia Hayes?" Olivia Hayes sat in a small Brooklyn cafe, her eyes fixed on her laptop screen, though her mind was consumed by the unpaid bills spread out before her. She sighed, scrolling through her inbox. No new contracts, no promising job offers. The tech startup she had poured her soul into had collapsed last year, and since then, she had been struggling to stay afloat. But it wasn't her own debt that weighed on her the most. It was her younger brother, Ryan. His chronic neurological condition was worsening, and insurance barely covered a fraction of the mounting medical expenses. Hospital notices kept arriving, and the bank had started issuing foreclosure warnings on her apartment. She tightened her grip on her coffee cup, trying to steady herself. Her phone buzzed, breaking through her anxious thoughts. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Olivia Hayes speaking. "Good afternoon, Miss Hayes. This is Mark Whitman, legal counsel for Coltech. I'd like to meet with you to discuss a potential opportunity." Olivia frowned. Coltech? She had never worked with them, but who didn't know about Ethan Cole? He was the tech prodigy who had built his empire from the ground up, transforming Coltech into an AI giant in under a decade. "I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Whitman." She took a sip of her now lukewarm coffee, her tone cautious. "I believe you'll find the offer quite intriguing. May I invite you to dinner to discuss the details?" Every instinct in Olivia's body screamed that this was unusual, but as her gaze flicked to the pile of overdue bills and the photo of Ryan on her phone's lock screen, his once bright eyes now tired from years of treatments, She knew she didn't have the luxury of turning down an opportunity. "All right," she said, after a long pause, gripping her phone tighter. "But I picked the place." Mark chuckled, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Clever." "Fair enough. I'll send you the time and location soon." As the call ended, Olivia leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. An invitation from one of the most powerful tech firms in the country? She had no idea what she was walking into, but one thing was certain: her life was about to change forever. Olivia stepped into the high-end restaurant, the warm golden lights casting an elegant glow over the pristine white tablecloths and crystal glassware. This was not the kind of place she usually found herself in. Her last meal had been a rushed sandwich while juggling work. She adjusted her jacket, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt among the elite clientele. As the waiter led her to a secluded table, her eyes landed on Mark Whitman, but her attention quickly shifted to the man sitting across from him, Ethan Cole. She had seen his face in countless tech articles: impeccable suits, piercing gaze, an air of absolute control. But seeing him in person was different. This wasn't just a powerful CEO. This was a man who was scrutinizing her with unnerving precision. "Mrs. Hayes?" His voice was deep, composed. "Thank you for coming." Olivia sat down, meeting his gaze head-on. "I don't usually accept cryptic invitations from billion-dollar corporations. You must have a very compelling reason." Ethan gestured toward Mark. "He'll explain." Mark adjusted his glasses, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table toward her. "We have a proposal for you, one that could solve all of your financial troubles." Olivia raised an eyebrow, but as she scanned the numbers on the page, her breath caught. The amount listed wasn't just enough to pay off her debts. It would cover Ryan's medical treatments for years. "I don't understand." She looked up. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his sharp blue eyes assessing her. "I need a wife." The words hung between them, heavy and unapologetic. Olivia blinked, momentarily convinced she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. Ethan sighed, as if he disliked this situation as much as she did. "My father's will states that if I'm not married by the time I turn 35, I lose control of my company. I have 3 months. A dry laugh escaped her. "And you think I'd agree to marry a complete stranger for money?" "It's not just about the money," Ethan said coolly. "You're intelligent, you have a strong background in tech. You're not some socialite looking for fame or power. You have a legitimate reason to enter this agreement, and I need someone who can keep this arrangement discreet." Olivia stared at him, her mind racing. "After 1 year," Mark interjected, "the marriage can end amicably, no strings attached. 1 year in exchange for Ryan's security, for a fresh start." Olivia took a deep breath. "If I say yes, I have one condition." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "What is it?" "We have to be honest with each other." She held his gaze. "No secrets." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Respect, perhaps. Maybe even approval. He nodded. "Deal." 3 weeks later, Olivia stood before the mirror in Ethan's luxury penthouse, staring at her own reflection. The navy cocktail dress hugged her curves perfectly, her hair styled in soft waves, her makeup more polished than it had ever been. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. Tonight was their engagement party, an orchestrated event to solidify this arrangement in the public eye. A part of her still couldn't believe she had agreed to this deal, but when she thought about Ryan's hospital bills being paid, her mother's home no longer at risk, she knew she had made the right choice. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Ethan stepped inside, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. He stopped for a brief second when he saw her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes before his expression returned to its usual controlled demeanor. "Are you ready?" His deep voice was steady, measured. Olivia nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." At the party, the press hovered like vultures, cameras flashing as they entered. Olivia felt the weight of their scrutiny, the pressure to play the role of the happy fiancé beside a man she barely knew. But Ethan made it easier when he placed a firm hand on her waist, leaning in just enough to whisper against her ear, "Just smile and let me lead." She followed his cue, keeping her nerves hidden behind a practiced smile. Things were going smoothly until a familiar voice sliced through the air behind them. "Ethan, I must say I'm surprised to hear you're engaged so suddenly." Olivia turned to see an elegantly dressed blonde woman, her features sharp, with barely concealed amusement. "Rachel Morgan, Ethan's ex." Olivia immediately sensed the underlying tension in Ethan's posture, the slight tightening of his jaw. Rachel's smile was poised as her gaze flickered over Olivia with careful scrutiny. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" Olivia extended her hand with a polite, professional smile. "Olivia Hayes, Ethan's fiancée." Rachel took Olivia's hand, her fingers cold and deliberate. Her smile was the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be something extraordinary to change Ethan's mind about marriage overnight." Olivia felt Ethan's grip on her waist tighten slightly. "Rachel," his voice was clipped, controlled. "There are some things that don't require explanation." But Olivia knew this was only the beginning of the complications she was about to face. The party continued, but Olivia couldn't shake the lingering discomfort from her encounter with Rachel. Ethan had remained composed, but she could tell the interaction had unsettled him. An hour later, she stepped onto the balcony, letting the cool night air calm her thoughts. Beneath the city lights, she finally had a moment to process everything. In just weeks, she had gone from struggling with debt to being engaged, to a billionaire no less. The glass door behind her slid open, and Olivia didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Hiding?" Ethan's voice was low, carrying a trace of exhaustion. She smirked, crossing her arms. "Just needed some air. I'm guessing you did too?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved beside her, his gaze fixed on the bustling streets below. "Rachel doesn't matter." Olivia turned to face him. "Really? Because you don't look like you believe that." Ethan exhaled, finally looking at her. "She's part of the past, but I know Rachel. She won't let this go easily." Olivia nodded, already sensing the storm ahead. "Let me handle it," Ethan said, but Olivia just smiled wryly. "I thought we were supposed to be a team, and if I'm going to be your fiancé, I should at least know who I'm up against." He studied her for a long moment before suddenly asking, "Do you care, Olivia?" Her heart skipped. She opened her mouth to dismiss the question, but found that she couldn't. This had started as a contract, but she couldn't ignore the way Ethan had defended her tonight, the way he had looked at her, as if she was more than just a convenient solution. "We agreed on honesty," Olivia said, taking a steady breath. "So, answer me one thing." Ethan waited. "Does this mean anything to you, or is it just a transaction?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He held her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes, as if he was fighting an internal battle. "We have an agreement, Olivia." His voice was measured, "and I always honor my commitments." It wasn't a denial, but it wasn't an admission either. Olivia let out a small, knowing laugh. "You're good at dodging questions, Ethan." She turned to leave, but before she could step inside, his voice stopped her. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Does this mean something to you?" Olivia hesitated, but instead of answering, she threw him a knowing glance over her shoulder before disappearing back into the party. She wasn't sure what she felt, but one thing was certain. This was no longer just a contract. 2 weeks later, Olivia walked into Coltech headquarters with a growing sense of unease. She was used to skeptical looks from employees, but today something felt different. People whispered as she passed, some glancing at their phones as if reading something shocking. She was about to ask Ethan's assistant what was going on when her phone buzzed. "Rachel Morgan, emergency board meeting." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. She hurried to the elevator, her pulse quickening. By the time she reached the boardroom, the doors were already shut. Through the glass walls, she saw Ethan at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Across from him sat Rachel and David Sinclair, one of the company's biggest shareholders. Olivia pushed the door open, and every gaze in the room turned to her. David spoke first. "I believe Ms. Hayes should be here for this as well." Rachel crossed her arms, a knowing smirk on her lips. "We've just come across some very interesting information. Turns out Ethan Cole's marriage is nothing more than a business arrangement." The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan said nothing, his gaze locked onto Rachel's with dangerous intensity. Olivia, though she had known this moment might come, still felt her stomach tighten. David slid a folder across the table. The press will get hold of this soon. The shareholders have a right to know whether their CEO is truly trustworthy. Rachel leaned back, her voice smooth yet sharp. Ethan, how do you think the board will react when they learn your marriage is a sham to maintain control of the company? Olivia saw Ethan's fingers tighten into a fist. He was furious. She took a steady breath, straightened her shoulders, and met Rachel's gaze head-on. If you think our marriage is just a performance, Olivia said slowly, then you don't understand us at all. She wasn't sure if the words came from instinct or something deeper, but one thing was certain. She wasn't about to let Ethan face this alone. This might have started as a contract, but now it had become something else entirely. The tension in the boardroom was suffocating. Olivia could feel every pair of eyes on her, waiting to see how she would react. Ethan remained silent, but she could sense his fury in the way his hand clenched into a fist on the table. Rachel smirked, her voice dripping with amusement. So, Olivia, you're saying this marriage is real? Olivia didn't blink. I'm saying that a piece of paper doesn't define a marriage. She turned to David and the rest of the board. The only thing that should matter here is whether Ethan is the best person to lead Coltech. David folded his arms, his expression skeptical. Then tell us, what exactly is this marriage? Olivia felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't back down. She turned to Ethan, searching for an answer in his eyes. And for the first time since this meeting began, Ethan didn't hide. He stood up, his sharp blue gaze never leaving hers. When we started this, yes, it was a deal, he admitted, his voice low but steady. But sometimes, the unexpected things become the most important. The room was deathly silent. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat pounding. Ethan took a slow, deliberate step toward her, his gaze unwavering. His voice, usually controlled, now carried an edge of vulnerability. Olivia isn't just my wife on paper. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair before meeting her eyes again. She's the reason I wake up every morning wanting to be better. She challenges me, supports me, and makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Rachel scoffed, but Ethan didn't let her interrupt. I love her, he said, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Olivia's eyes widened, her heart stalling. And contract or not, Ethan continued, I'd choose her, again and again. A tidal wave of emotion crashed through Olivia. She no longer cared about Rachel or the board. In that moment, it was just her and Ethan. She stepped forward, pressing a hand to his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. You think you're the only one who feels that way? Olivia whispered. And before Ethan could respond, she pulled him into a kiss that wasn't for show, wasn't part of a contract, but one that said everything she hadn't been able to put into words. The boardroom fell into stunned silence, but Olivia didn't care. She had just found her answer. Morning sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows of Coltech's headquarters, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Olivia sat in her office, eyes scanning the latest report on a groundbreaking AI project she was leading. A lot had changed in a year. That boardroom confrontation had been a turning point. After Ethan's public confession, the board had no grounds to challenge him, especially once Olivia proved she wasn't just his wife, but an integral part of Coltech. Since then, the company had only grown stronger. Olivia was no longer just the CEO's wife. She was now the Chief Innovation Officer, working alongside Ethan to propel Coltech into the future. The office door opened and Ethan walked in, hands in his pockets, amusement flickering in his sharp blue eyes as he watched her immersed in work. I thought today was Sunday, he said. Olivia smirked, leaning back in her chair. Coming from the man who works 24/7, that's hilarious. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Well, then you'll love this next part. I have plans for today. She eyed him warily. Plans? Ethan set an envelope on her desk. Olivia opened it. Inside were 2 plane tickets. "Where are we going?" she asked. Ethan smirked, leaning down to brush a quick kiss against her lips. "Paris." "We never had a honeymoon." Olivia laughed, warmth spreading through her chest. A year ago, she had never imagined falling in love with Ethan, never imagined that what started as a contract would become the most important thing in her life. But now, she couldn't imagine life without him. "Well, Mr. Cole," she teased, "you'll have to convince my boss first." Ethan's smirk deepened. "Oh, I'm pretty sure I can do that." He pulled her into a slow, lingering kiss. A promise, a declaration, a silent vow that no contract could ever define, from a business arrangement to something raw, real, and irrevocable. And this time, there were no conditions, no contracts. Just two people who had chosen each other.